Hello everyone, it is I, Wooden Railway Edward, your resident Thomas and Friends unboxer. I am not totally pleased with the amount of unboxing and flea market finds videos that I have made and will promptly post. However, it is a good evergreen type of content that I can post while I'm busy with other things. And although, yes, I'd love to make a remake every month or release episodes of my series, that would be a miracle, but I just don't have the current time to do so. So these are the best thing. And I think that some of this stuff is really cool. So let's begin another flea market finds. I believe this is the 4th episode, and today we have some real goodies, and all of it is Thomas and Friends. So no model train stuff. I did put a poll out on my YouTube channel and Twitter, quotations X, asking, would you rather have a flea markets finds video with the model train stuff together or mixed up with Thomas and Friends? I got some mixed results, so I thought I'd try a little bit of both. I know last time there was a couple Thomas and Friends things, but this time it is all good Thomas and Friends merchandise. So let's begin taking a look at what's in front of us, and I will go in chronological order from when I found this stuff. I found this stuff at flea markets, antique shops, thrift stores, so all over my local area, and I'm excited to share it with you. This first thing is a DVD, as you can see. It is a Spills and Chills and Other Thomas Thrills DVD. It was 99 cents, as you can see the price tag right there. Opening up the DVD, pretty standard. There is no pamphlet attached to it. The disc actually looks pretty good. There's not that many scratches on it, so I am hoping that that will mean it is in working condition if I were to put it into a DVD player. On the back, it has some gunk. I actually didn't notice that until now, so I could work to get some of that stuff off. And it says, next stop, excitement. Daily life on the island of Sodor is always full of adventure for Thomas and his friends. Many times, these journeys lead to chilling and thrilling situations. Watch what happens when a loose boulder spells near disaster for Rusty and Percy. Join Thomas as he rushes to save Sir Topham Hatt's vacation, and help lead a lost Stepney back to safety. Full steam ahead for edge-of-your-seat excitement. I can just hear that guy's voice who used to do the DVD bonus segments saying that line, so that's pretty nostalgic for me, actually. The approximate running time is 37 minutes, and let's see what year this is from. It looks like 2002. So, of course, this used to be a VHS, and they repackaged it, Anchor Bay did, as a DVD release, keeping this same style of artwork. And I never had this DVD when I was a kid. It was kind of random, actually, the DVDs that I had. Most of them were later reprints. Like, I had that reprint of James Learns a Lesson where it had an apple cover. It kind of always reminded me of back-to-school advertising for some reason. But I didn't have that many classic series, specifically Season 5 DVDs. So it's nice in my later years here of collecting to get some of these and round out my collection of home media. Now, I'll say I wasn't the biggest fan of collecting home media even just a couple years back, but just seeing these things in stores and remembering the classic episodes that are on these discs and VHS tapes really makes me want to purchase and preserve them and add them to my collection. Of course, they are all on digital media, but that could be gone in the snap of a finger. So to have these physical media DVDs and VHSs of these episodes in my possession that I own is assurance that I can watch them for years to come, especially the DVDs because they don't degrade. I'll just quickly show a VHS comparison. I actually have, for some reason, 2 VHSs. I can't remember where I got one of the... Actually, never mind, I do. One of these I got at the same thrift store where I purchased this DVD. That was a couple months ago. And then about a year or 2 years ago, I got this at the flea market, and I believe this was actually my first flea market finds video. One of them is a blue tape, and one of them is a black tape. But you can see that it's literally the same artwork that is on the DVD cover. There's really nothing different to it, and it looks like these are from the same year as well. So nothing really different there. I will point out, I didn't notice that there's red marker and, oh, I guess that's part of Harold's propeller. But this red marker is definitely not supposed to be there. So if you have any suggestions for how I could get rid of that, that would be very helpful. I literally just noticed that. But for $1 at the thrift store, I think that's a great purchase, and that will be something that I would buy every day of the week if they had that. Next up, we have Percy Takes the Plunge. And this is somewhat what I was talking about, that in the later years here, Anchor Bay and then, of course, Lionsgate started distributing this home media. They were the ones to add these weird covers that, and nowadays, you'd say almost look AI generated to these DVD repackaging. So this is Percy, and it's Percy Takes a Plunge. He has cars here that are blue. You can see the lighthouse and the cliffs in the background from the hit era. Sorry, the DVD keeps dropping. And then Percy is splashing into the water on this random grassy track. So, of course, this is an amalgamation of many different pieces of artwork that were photoshopped together, and it really just does not make sense. I actually have the Thomas Gets Tricked DVD, which is very similar. It has Thomas and I believe it's the jet engine in its box alongside one of the castles. It just doesn't make sense. But here you can see that it is the classic episode on the back. It is Percy as he's covered in treacle. I believe that, or excuse me, that's not what that is. I was thinking that this was from A Scarf for Percy, but it's actually from Percy Takes the Plunge. So excuse me for that. This picture of Thomas looks like it is from the hit era. So once again, very weird. I was never planning on exclusively going out and getting this DVD, but since I found it at the thrift store for $3, I thought it wasn't too bad of a deal, and, you know, why not? Why not add another DVD? I never had the original Percy Takes a Plunge. And now that I think about it, was there ever a Percy Takes a Plunge, or is this a new concept? Home media experts will have to help me out, but now that I say it, I don't think there ever was a Percy Takes the Plunge. I think that's a new DVD concept, sort of like Rusty Saves the Day or Henry and the Elephant is what I'm thinking of. Next up, we have Carnival Capers. Here is Thomas alongside a carnival, or as people in the UK would call it, a fun fair, which I think is pretty funny. There's Rosie, Percy, and Rocky on the bottom. Rosie and Rocky must have been released, or introduced rather, in some of these episodes. On the back, you have the Chinese dragon. I completely forgot that was reintroduced in the hit era. You have Rosie and Rocky, and the back just talks a little bit about them. Let's see the year of this DVD. It says 2007, if it would focus for you guys. There we go. It was also $3. It has the Lionsgate distribution. And opening it up, the disc has a couple scratches on it, so I'm actually not sure if that's going to run great. But regardless, I thought this was a really interesting cover, and I specifically remember on PBS Sprout, when that channel used to exist, they very briefly ran hit era episodes, and I very vividly remember watching the episode with Rosie where she's delivering the fun fair stuff, and then she crashes into Stepney, I believe, and then I think Emily or something like that. I can't quite remember the episode, but I just remember that Rosie was in it, and I think it was called Rosie's Fun Fair Special or something like that. I don't know, actually. This looks like the new episode where Rosie's introduced at that station with Thomas, but the carnival theme made me think of that episode. So that's why I picked it up. I thought it was a little bit nostalgic for me. Anyway, you can see this is not Thomas and Friends, so I guess I lied a little bit in the intro. However, this is pretty close to Thomas and Friends. It is Chuggington, Icy Escapades. That does sound like a Thomas and Friends title. And the reason I picked this up, we'll see in a second, but looking on the back, I like how it says the episodes, and it says Tommy too, which we'll get to in a second. And let's see who, I guess Anchor Bay also released this DVD. And let me see when it was released. It says 2012. So it's kind of interesting as a Thomas and Friends fan, when Anchor Bay stopped releasing Thomas and Friends home media, that they were still existing as a company releasing this Chuggington media. So that's kind of cool in that sense. And you can see this is a hefty package. So this is actually one of those things where it came with a DVD, but it also came with an engine. So we will see shortly what engine that is. And looking at the DVD, you can see it is pretty similar box art wise. Opening it up, here is the disc, and it's pretty spotless actually. And then it also comes with a pamphlet. I have never seen that before. If you can see that on screen, that almost looks like a souped up version of the Superstation. That's pretty crazy actually. It has an Amtrak ad, which is interesting, I guess. And it also has, look at the old iPad and the version of the iPhone. That's pretty funny. And it shows some other episodes that are on DVD. So anyway, that's pretty cool. I don't think I'll watch this just because I have no investment in Chuggington. I know some YouTubers quite like it. I remember that the Thomas Theorist made a video on it, and also I know that Hero the Japanese Train has commended Chuggington for its own merits. Just, I have no interest in it, and, you know, I'm actually not the biggest fan of animation, which I know is kind of weird, but it just never really appeals to me. CGI, I just really don't care. So that is why I never really got invested in Chuggington. I know it was on Disney Junior in the United States for a while, and I watched a couple episodes, but it never hooked my interest. However, looking in the thrift store, this definitely did interest me. Here is Wilson, and it is a very special version of Wilson. You can see that there is ice on his side. It's almost like these crystals of ice and icicles sticking up from his wheels right here, which I think is a very, very cool look. You can see they made his wheels and whole chassis this light blue color. It doesn't continue on the back, but it is on the other side, and I believe that's just mirrored from one side to the other. Nothing on the front of him. His eyes kind of look weird. It looks like he's dopey-eyed. I don't really know how to describe it, but that's pretty funny. On the top, there's no detailing, but like I said, this ice design is very, very cool, and he is in very, very good condition, actually. I can't see really any edge wear or paint chips in the metal on his model. Looking on the bottom, let's try to see what year he is. It looks like 2010. So I'm not sure if this was exclusive to this DVD pack, or he came in a set or something like that, but I'm very happy to have him. You can see that he has this coupling design that is sort of a ball and joint coupler. It kind of reminds me of the Lego ball and joint connections. And this is able to spin around a little bit so he can move on curves. This is the equivalent to the Thomas and Friends diecast range. So I guess the comparison would be Thomas and Friends Take and Play. Of course, they also made Wooden Railway Chuggington merchandise, which I don't have any of. However, for what it's worth, I think he's a pretty cool character. This DVD pack cost me $3, so not bad at all for this model. And although he is not in my favorite merchandise sphere of Chuggington, I'm still happy to have Wilson. And who knows, maybe one day I will get Brewster and Coco as well. But of course, I do not plan on actively searching them out. So with that said, I think it's time to look at some other stuff that we have. This is the last home media of this video, but I thought I'd quickly show this as, you know, I've gotten back into wanting DVDs and VHSs, and I thought these were some cool pickups. So let's move on. So our next items are in two baggies. And you can see that there is some Thomas and Friends Take Along, Take and Play, and some Wooden Railway goodies in here, much to my excitement. So let me explain as I open these up. I found these at the flea market, and I believe this is my 4th or 5th trip to that specific flea market, which I've talked about in previous videos. And I found this from one seller, both of these bags, and also something we'll be taking a look at later. Two of somethings, actually. And this lady always seems to have some Thomas and Friends stuff. I actually searched around her table for a very, very long time, and they were buried under bags of other toys. And I was almost about to leave, but I saw these. They caught my eye. Specifically, it was Billy over here, who I saw first, but we'll get to him in a second. However, that's besides the point. I found these, and I haggled down the price a little bit, and I was able to take them home, which I was very pleased with. So you can see that this first bag has exclusively die-cast merchandise. So why don't we take a look at it? First, we can take a look at this, which may look familiar. I actually already have one of these, which I took a look at in the last unboxing video. But nonetheless, it's good to have a different variant of this. This time it is Maithwaite Station. And let's see if I can remember how to open this up. It's actually not... Oh, there we go. It wasn't going well for a little bit there. And opening this up, you can see that it is a nice little playset. There's a spot here for an engine to be put into, a little shed. And there is 3 connection points to expand this to other tracks. I'll just put Toby on it for an example as he goes around the layout. I was never a big fan of the take-and-play, take-along tracks. As you can see, sort of like the ERTL, Toby can move a lot around here. And it's not like Wooden Railway where he nicely stays on the track. Over here, you can actually see Sodor Mail. I didn't notice that originally, but there is a decal here of packages and letters and stuff like that. And on this side, you can see it's just plastic detailing in the molding, but still very nice. And of course, this is supposed to be Maithwaite Station over here. There's a little pond, some random wheels and wrenches in the grass, which is pretty funny. And just green around here. There's a rope over here, some rope over here. Overall, just a very nice little play set for a young kid who might be on the go, maybe on vacation, and they just want to play with their toy trains for a little bit. So now I have the paint shop and Maithwaite, so that is pretty cool. And let's take a look at some of this other stuff here. I'll bring it on camera. Sorry that it was off camera. First, we have Connor's Tender. So this is from Take and Play, I believe. There's a little hair on there. I'll try to get that off. It is in pretty good condition, but of course, without the Connor engine, it is kind of useless, in my opinion. You can see that it says Connor on the bottom, made in Thailand. Besides that, though, there's buffer detailing not painted on. The magnets look a little bit corroded. Besides that, pretty cool. Here we have Neville's Tender. Of course, you can notice it because of the very unique design of Neville's Tender. It says it on the bottom as well. No date on the bottom or anything like that. But on the wheels, I believe this will be Take Along. Or maybe it's Take and Play. It says made in China. So that's kind of interesting. I guess they moved production throughout the lifespan of these die-cast toys. Nonetheless, pretty cool to have Neville's Tender. It is actually pretty hefty in weight. But again, without the engines, it's kind of pointless to have the Tender, especially in a merchandise range that I do not actively collect. Next up, let's take a look at Victor. You can notice right off the bat he has different couplings, and that is because this is Adventures Victor. He has a pretty good Victor face, if I do say so myself. Better, I believe, than the Learning Curve / Tomy or Mattel Victor. On the bottom, it says his name, 2013 by Mattel, also made in Thailand. Of course, not 2013. This would probably actually be manufactured in 2016, since Adventures, I believe, came out in 2017. But I digress. He has the coupling on the back, but you can see that the proportions with Adventures started to go wonky. Look how small his narrow gauge wheels are, but how blocky his chassis is, along with how square he is and elongated. It is just not the best combo. However, for what it's worth, he's still a pretty cool engine. You can see he has the Sodor Steamworks logo, some nice handrail detailing on the side of his cab. On the other side, it is mirrored. On the top, he has that lamp and funnel detail. His boiler is, or excuse me, his smoke box is plastic. The boiler and this part of the cab are metal, but he has a pretty light engine. It is weird that adventures only lasted for a year. I will never not be perturbed by the rotating door of merchandise from Mattel. It seems like every year they revamp, scrap, and restart their merchandise ranges, which I just cannot comprehend. It actually is making me mad just thinking about it. It just doesn't make sense, and I'm not going to rant about it here for long, but it is no wonder that so many of these items are floating around because people never got an attachment to any of them. Kids were never able to build up big collections like you would be for Thomas Wooden Railway or the original Take-Along or even ERTL or Trackmaster. It just doesn't make sense. Anyway, next up we have Henry. Oh, I didn't actually press that button until now. Let's play that again.
I'm a really useful engine.
Okay, that sound chip sounded good. The whistle sounds a little bit wonky. I think the batteries might be dying in there. I'll have to unscrew him and try to put new button batteries, I believe, are in here, into him. You can see the speaker on his back and his face there. His eyebrows are a little bit worn off, but I think that's a pretty good Henry face. And there's nothing like these classic take-along engines. Let's see, what year does he say? It says 2009, so excuse me, this is actually take and play. However, my point still stands that you can see how nice his wheel configuration is here, his proportions, how the wheel arches actually line up with his wheels. Overall, just a very, very nice model. His buffers are painted. I mean, you really can't ask for more in a simple toy like this. I think he looks great. The only thing missing, obviously, is his tender, and unfortunately, I just don't think Neville's tender fits him too well. So I wish that I had his tender, but alas, there is no tender for Henry. Hopefully someday I will find it. I believe, actually, there's an episode or a story called Tenders for Henry. Either a fan episode or a Railway Series story. I actually can't remember right now, but that rang a bell in my head. Anyway, back to Toby here. You can see that he is very, very nice and actually in very good condition. He is a little bit taller than Henry, which, if you think about it, doesn't really make sense at all. But he is still a very cute model, in my opinion. He's very boxy and just, you can hold him in your hand. I really like that about him. He is also labeled 2009, so he is take and play, made in China, it says right there. His face is a great Toby face, in my opinion. He has painted on buffer detailing. His magnets look in very good condition. And the detailing and painting on the sides, in addition to the physical bell, his smokestack right here, and also his whistle and this, you know, whatever else is on his roof here is all 3D and painted, which I really like. So all this stuff I got for the retail price, in quotations, was $10. I was able to get it for $7, which I think is, you know, a fine deal for the stuff that is here. Online, this would probably go for about $10 or $15, and separately, this stuff could go for more. So I'm happy for $7 to get this stuff. So let's move on to this second bag over here. I'll scoot this to the side. And this is the stuff I'm really interested in because, as you can see, it is Thomas Wooden Railway, which is my main cup of tea. So let's open it up and see what's inside. We have another one of these playset things right here. This time it is Farmer McColl's Farm. We also have a musical caboose. We have Billy right here. We have a Brio thing right here. You can see it is a giraffe. We'll take a look at that in a second. And we also have a shark aquarium car. This is labeled as $15, but I was able to get all this stuff for $10. So overall, for the two of these things, $17 I do not think is bad in the slightest. So let's open up this playset and take a look at it. It will be pretty similar to the other one. you can see that it mostly is, although this one has 2 circles of tracks. It still has the 3 connection points. It has Farmer McColl's farm, where an engine could go inside. And it has the ice cream shop over here, or rather ice cream factory that was featured in the hit era. I guess the ice cream factory is for the dairy that comes from the farm, and then they turn it into ice cream somehow. There's some bags of flour and some hay bales, some milk jugs and corn. Looks like some tomatoes or apples in the grass right here. Pretty good detailing overall. Let me just bring in our exemplar Toby. You can see he can go around the track right here. Make figure eights like he's almost skating. That's pretty fun. And of course, this can connect to the other one. So why don't we try that really quick? Try connecting them. And actually, that builds a pretty nice playset. That looks really great together. So you can see if I take these off, that Toby, let's say he started off at the Sodor bale, and then he goes around by Farmer McColl's farm. He makes a loop-de-loop here. And let's see if I can actually get him out of this loop-de-loop. There we go. He goes past Nathwaite Station and then makes a loop around and yada yada. The story continues. But for play feature, that is actually really cool. And with how tightly these can pack up, that was a really great design. This is back when companies like Learning Curve really cared about playability and also just having something so nice and compact. They really put a lot of care into these toys and really thought out how these would work, you know? And it is a shame that that is no longer the case. I will appreciate these for what they are, even though I am not the biggest fan of Take-Along or Diecast. I think these are actually pretty cool. They even have a little handle here where you can carry them around. So I'll put those in the background. And let's move on to what we were originally looking at, which is these cool Thomas Wooden Railway items. So let's first take a look at this aquarium car. There is still some juice in there. The shark is just barely surviving. If you put it to the front, you can see he still can breathe a little bit. Of course, knowing about sharks, that most of them need to constantly be moving, it is pretty funny that they're just transporting this on the rails. If you really think about it, it is just pretty stupid and ridiculous. On the bottom, it is labeled 2003, the wheels. It says aquarium car on the bottom. There is some edge wear on the chassis, but these cars are probably some of the most prevalent merchandise, especially this later design of the aquarium cars. I know there was a boxier design earlier on, but this sort of 2008, 2009 redesign of them, I just see everywhere. And I know people actually just take off the chassis and use it for other models. I actually even have a set of these aquarium cars. You can see right here. My liquid actually looks clear. This one is very, very blue. So that's sort of an interesting difference. And these aquarium cars I have had, as I said, for a very long time. Interestingly, on the bottom here, you can see it says Learning Curve Brands, Inc. That is not on the bottom of this one, so that's an interesting difference. But now I have 3 aquarium cars, 1 octopus and 2 shark. So again, not very useful for videos. I mean, just having an engine pull around the aquarium cars is kind of dumb. However, it's Thomas Wooden Railway, and I can add it to my collection, so I am not complaining in the slightest. Next up, we have this draft car, which you can see on the wheels is from Brio. There is nothing on the bottom except these 2 screws. And as you roll it along, it kind of has an uneven roll. But the play feature of this is that if you open up the roof, slide it to the right here, the draft head pops up, which I think is a really nice play feature. You can almost have it bobble up and down. You can see the draft pattern is on the side and along the draft's neck there. And I actually didn't point this out, but on this side it says Brio with a sticker on the chassis. And I think for what it's worth, this is a really nice play feature for kids. I believe that Milk Tanker Media released a video of his Brio items and had this. I definitely remember the alligator, but I'm pretty sure he had this one as well. I don't really have much use for this. I don't think I could even really have it in a video with this garish print on the side, but maybe it could be a background Easter egg. Although, to come with this different stuff, I'm still very happy to have it. Next up, we have the musical caboose, which pressing the button does not work anymore. This is my third musical caboose. You can see my other two off to the side. This is my original one. This one I got in one of my eBay purchases. And then, of course, here's my third one. Its edgeware is kind of similar to my older one. And who can go wrong with some more cabooses? I mean, you can never have too many of these. So I am pretty happy to have this. And interestingly, if you look on the bottom of all three of these, all three of them are different. My old one just has a little label there. This one has the Learning Curve Brands Inc. on the bottom. This one has the Learning Curve Brands Inc., but also this battery sign. So just very interesting how all of these are different in one way or another. And like I said, you can't go wrong with another musical caboose, so I'm happy to add it to my collection. Of course, what really caught my eye was Billy, or as he's called, Silly Billy. So on the bottom, you can see it says Billy, and actually the Learning Curve Brands ink is sort of in this burnt orange color, which I never noticed before, but I think that's really cool. Looking at my Billy, it is very, very similar. And I remember my original Billy I got many years ago for my birthday. I can't remember which birthday it was, but I remember I got him and maybe Rosie and Charlie for my birthday. And of course, as a little kid, these bright colors are very appealing. And actually, orange is my favorite color. So I sort of have an appreciation for Billy. Not Nia, because Nia I just don't like as a character. But Billy, he's just a goofy engine. I mean, look at his buck teeth and his wide pupils right there. But Billy, you really, you can't dislike Billy. And I know people really hate him as a character, but I think he's just sort of a silly engine. And I'm happy to have another model of him. Unfortunately, it wasn't an engine I didn't have. Like, it would be awesome to get Neville or Hank or Flora or something like that. But to have another version of Billy with similar edgeware, I think actually my version might be in a little bit better condition. But nonetheless, still another Thomas Wooden Railway engine who is not too common to have in my collection, so I am not complaining. All these items are very nice, and for $10, I was very happy with it. So let's take a look at the last thing that I got from that seller on that day. Here is my lunchbox. Let's see what I packed for lunch today. It is a Friday, so maybe there's a treat in there, like a cookie or a brownie or something. And I'm just really excited to come eat here. Oh. So this is not very edible, but there's still some good stuff in here. So enough with the little bit right there. You can see that this is a Thomas and Friends lunchbox, sort of like those OG lunchboxes. I know a lot of people collect these, and actually you can hear the sound right there. This has been bothering me for the months that I have had this, waiting to make a video on it. This stupid All Engines Go Thomas will not stop, and there's no off button that I can see. This infuriates me. I'm in the middle of just doing work or just doing something else, and this is on the other side of the room, and I can hear this stupid Thomas start going when I'm not making any movement or shaking the floor or like shaking the table. So I cannot wait to take the batteries out of this stupid Thomas so I can never hear it again. So that's a side rant for me. We'll get to him in a second. He can be in timeout for right now. But looking at the rest of this stuff, you can see it is pretty cool. So let's take a look at this first Thomas. It is another diecast Thomas. I feel like I'm racking these up pretty fast. It says Thomas on the bottom, 2012 Mattel. and this is from when Mattel took over the Thomas. His face is a little bit weird. It's supposed to be a CGI face, but it just looks like there's something off about his face. Overall, though, very nice detailing for Thomas right here. Happy to have him. Really, the only edge where he has is on the cab of, or the roof of his cab, excuse me. And I could color that in with the Sharpie or something. This is non-Thomas Wooden Railway. This looks like it is from, it says Target right there. So yeah, this is a Target coach, I guess it is. It does have a T on there, so maybe that's T for train or Thomas. You never know. It almost looks like a caboose with the overhang here, but maybe it's an observation car or something like that. I really have no use for this. Maybe one day I'll turn it into a custom or something like that, but it just came along with these toys. We have Percy, and this is a Trackmaster Revolution Percy. It doesn't appear to have batteries in it, although the on and off switch is kind of sticky. I'm not the biggest fan of Trackmaster. I don't really actively collect it, but this is a nice looking Percy. Ew, okay, that's disgusting. He has something on his side, and you can see it got on my hand there, so that's pretty gross. I'll have to wipe that off. His face, his pupils look a little bit wrong. Don't they look a little bit blurry, or it looks like he just went to the eye doctor and had his pupils dilated, so that's kind of funny. Minimal detailing on here. Of course, it has the tread on the wheel, and it has the weird wheel configuration where the wheels are so spread apart. Again, not the biggest fan of Trackmaster, especially that older, or the newer stuff. And lastly, we have, it looks like Annie, or maybe Clarabelle, you never know. But this, of course, is supposed to go along with the All Engines Go Thomas. And I am going to do something I'll probably regret here and have this guy go on the carpet. So let's see what happens. Okay, now when I press the button, he's not working. Okay. Oh, and he's running off the set, so I have to go get him. So I really cannot stand this Thomas. He actually went into the other room. He just kept chuffing along there. So that Thomas is not one of my favorites, and I cannot wait to take the battery out. Honestly, I don't even want to look at his details just because he has no interest, in my opinion. I have no interest in him. So I'll just set him in the background right there. The main thing that I thought was cool was this metal lunchbox. On the top, it says Tin Box, and you can see it is saying greetings from the island of Sodor. It has sort of a 3D pop-out of Thomas, Percy, Harold, James. And then on the back, you can see it is the same picture, just without the 3D effect. But on the side, it says things like, come visit the island of Sodor, come visit soon, all these other things. 2009 Ghislaine, it is labeled. But overall, I think this is really nice with this postcard design and with this classic Thomas face. And if I was going to school when I was in elementary school, I would definitely think this was pretty cool, and some of my friends would as well. So I actually got this. It was labeled as $10. I got it down to $7. So for $7 for all this stuff, I don't think it's really that bad. Of course, some of this stuff is junk. Some of it I'll just add to my collection. No Thomas Wooden Railway, which I actively use. But regardless, I still think this is some cool Thomas and Friends goodies. And I'll need to find a place to display this tin box. So let's move on to the next items. As I made my way out of the flea market that day, I stopped by a seller who I know very well. It is the gentleman who sold me all of my model train things that I have shown off in the last few installments of Flea Market Finds. But I did notice two Thomas and Friends items, and they came together. It was an ERTL Tinmouth Milk and Tar Tanker. And these are the first ERTL rolling stock items that I have gotten. And I do not have that many ERTL items, but as you know from other videos, I've gotten some in different lots and things I found at the flea market and at the thrift store and things like that. So I am very, very happy to have these now. Of course, ERTL never made that much rolling stock, and I believe they made some troublesome trucks, maybe some vans and stuff like that, but they were never very prevalent. It was mostly about the engines, kind of like how Take Along, Take and Play was. Anyway, these are very, very light. They are made almost entirely of plastic. I think except for these screws right here, they are all plastic. But they do look very nice, in my opinion. I think they look very, very nice. Their coupling is the standard ERTL coupling. And on the bottom, let's see what they say. It says 1993. So sort of in the middle age of ERTL as a brand. They're pretty much the same except for the color variation, of course, between the two different variants of Tidmouth Milk and Tar. Overall, very happy with these two, and I was able to get them for 50 cents each. So for $1 for these two, not bad in the slightest, and I'm very happy to have them. I also, from a different seller, found this, which is Thomas Wooden Railway. It is Terence, and it is a very old version of Terence. If we look on the wheels, it says 2002. So this is the old style version of Terence the tractor. His face has been through some stuff. You can see he is looking sort of creepy, actually. His dome has some paint taken off of it. But overall, for what it's worth, I'm very happy to have this old version of Terence. Let me bring in a new style version of Terence. This is the one I got in a lot many years ago where the treads just completely broke off. And this is the only version of Terence I currently have. So now I have the old and new style learning curve Terences. They look pretty good together. It's interesting to notice the color difference. This is sort of a reddish orange, where this is much more of a, maybe like a cream or yellowish orange. Overall, I do prefer this one still. Although this Terence is very cute, even though his face looks a little bit demonic. I don't believe he ever came with treads. Maybe he did, but they never really stayed on the wheels, I don't think. And of course, he still has a magnet on the back, which doesn't really make sense. But I guess if he was towing something like the aquarium car, that's a pretty funny visual. Overall, though, I got this Terence for $1. So once again, it's these kind of purchases which I always sort of dreamed of, finding this stuff on flea markets and stuff like that. So I'm very happy that that dream is coming to fruition more and more often as I go to these places and try to hunt out these Thomas & Friends merchandise items. With that said, I think it's time to move to our final items. So we're going to round out the array of Thomas merchandise with a couple more diecast items. First of all, let's look at this little guy. It is Fearless Freddie, the take and play version of Fearless Freddie. On the bottom, he is labeled 2006, and you can see his name. It's a little scuffed up there, but his name is on the bottom. And I think this is a very nice looking item. You can see the wrinkles around his eyes and his jolly smile. And of course, Fearless Freddie as a character, I'd like to think of him as sort of a mentor towards the narrow gauge engines, maybe a fun uncle type of character. He definitely has a lot of adventurous stories to tell. Maybe not the best role model, but definitely a wise and knowledgeable engine about working on a railway, I guess you could say. Besides that, you can see that he has edgeware around his funnel and also his cab area, although I do like how you can see inside his cab. That was something with some of the take-along and take-and-play items that I definitely did like coming from Thomas Wooden Railway. I mean, even his windows at the back of his cab here are open, so that lets some light into there and also just adds some more detail. I definitely could see a little figurine of a driver and fireman standing on the footplate there. This Freddie, I got him for 25 cents at a neighborhood garage sale some time ago, but I thought it was a great deal. I was looking for more Thomas & Friends things. I was a little disappointed I didn't find anything else, but the lady who sold me this was very nice, and even though it was listed as $1, she gave it to me for only $0.25, which I thought was a great deal. I actually have 2 Thomas Wooden Railway Fearless Freddies, so now somehow I have 3 Fearless Freddy merchandise items in my collection. But the bigger item here, I also found at the flea market during a different trip, a little after the first trip that I took a look at in this video where I got the other things. And you can see this is something very, very cool. It is a boxed item, which you don't see very often at those types of places. And it is a take-along curved and straight track pack. As someone who never really saw take-along take and play in stores and never was very interested in it to begin with, this is something very cool. I mean, imagine in the day this was at Toys R Us or maybe Walmart sitting on the shelf, or, as it is said on the box, at Kmart. You can see this is where that was originally sold. And this is just something that you would not see anymore. I mean, a track pack. I don't believe that the new merchandise even Mattel's making for 2025 even has any compatible track. I mean, I guess you have Trackmaster track, but this was a whole separate range of track compatibility for diecast engines. Of course, Wooden Railway and Trackmaster had their own types of track. So it really was dedicated to these different avenues of making merchandise with different playability factors. Of course, Take Along, that whole gimmick was that it was very portable. We could see from Farmer McColl's Farm and Maithwaite Station those little playable sets that they could be carried around. Of course, that's why it's called Take Along. Anyway, enough of me rambling. You can see I got this for $5, which I thought was a really, really great purchase. Looking online, these, new in the box at least, of course this is not new, but new in the box, they go for around $50. On the bottom here, it says 2008 Hit Entertainment, and obviously 2008 Learning Curve. There's the classic Learning Curve logo. And I really like the baby blue color design. You can see there's a design of Sir Topham Hatt's hat, a sign, flags, a ticket, and a suitcase, along with a T for Thomas. And of course, that very classic Take Along logo. I do not have much Take Along track, and it is actually put away right now in one of my storage areas, so I'm not going to get it out. However, hopefully we can still enjoy opening this track pack up and seeing what pieces are inside. Speaking of which, I guess we should mention that it comes with an adapter track, which I think is supposed to adapt. I was thinking maybe adapt to the ERTL track, but also it could be adapt to Wooden Railway perhaps, so we'll have to look at that. But you can see it comes with some straight and curved track and some smaller pieces, so let's take a look at it. I'm hoping that all track pieces are in here. There's supposed to be 22 pieces of track, so let's just all take it out. And you can see it looks like there is a lot of track in there. I will definitely be keeping the box, as that's something very, very cool in my opinion. So let's just take a look at a standard piece of curved track, and I feel like you really never see this. This track was not as pertinent to the range as was Wooden Railway track to the Wooden Railway trains, as I feel most of the time kids would just use this on the carpet or hardwood floor, or, you know, wherever they were, even in the car, maybe on an airplane, a kid was playing with that, I could see. But this track was not very utilized, I feel like. But you can see it snaps together. And let's just say that Freddie, on this really rocky set right now, I guess it makes sense because he's a mountain engine, but you can see he rolls along fine. But as I talked about, there's a lot of empty space here for him to shake back and forth. So not the biggest fan of the track design, but, you know, it works for what it is. Looks like there was a little leaf in there, so we'll discard of that. And you can see there's some other stuff that was in that box, so I'll have to vacuum the carpet. But we'll count this out. So here's 3 pieces of curved track. You can see here's another piece of curved track. Here's some pieces of straight track, which is pretty cool to see. It looks like there is a 4-inch, or I guess 5-inch and 6-inch variant. So really not that big of a size difference, but substantial enough, I suppose. And it looks like there is the correct amount of track in here. You can see all of this straight track, and of course back here there's some smaller curves. And looking at this must be an adapter to ERTL track. You can see right there, there's sort of a little bump up, and I do not have any ERTL track, but I believe that is what this is too. Let's see on the back. It says adapter, well, of course, adapter male, adapter female here, and it says 2006 learning curve. That's very nice. You also have a short piece of track. I believe this is a 2-inch. And then you have this female-female and male-male adapter connection right here. And the smallest straight piece is this one right here. Let's see, is that even in the box? Yeah, it looks like it is. So you have this, and then let's see, there's another one of those. So overall, just a lot of cool pieces of track. And then going over here, looks like there's some more adapter track, which is very cool. So let's count out how many pieces are in here. So let's see. I'll count out and I'll let you guys know in a second. So after counting all of this track, there is way more than 22 pieces. I think there's approximately 35 plus pieces of track in here. So I think the person who had this or the person selling it, I don't know what happened, but they included some extra pieces of track, which I am definitely not complaining about. I think that is awesome that I paid $5 for all of this track here. Here is Freddie, just for comparison with this long straight piece of track. You can see that there is some standard curves and straight pieces of track. There's a little bit longer straight piece of track, a 4-inch straight piece of track, 2-inch. There's some of these connector pieces, some of the adapter pieces, and also some small 4-inch curves. Overall, very happy with all of this track that I now have. And who knows, maybe I'll try to build somewhat of a small take-and-play, take-along layout with those other quote-unquote destinations that I have, and we'll see if I can make something cool. I never thought I'd really get into take-along, take-and-play, but I'm starting to get a lot of merchandise with all the engines and now this track and some destinations and rolling stock that I've acquired. So who knows, maybe someday I'll change my name to Take Along Edward or something of the sort. Anyway, humor aside, you can see all of this track is in great condition with the exception of this piece, which you can see has some distress in the plastic. You can see some of the white marks from bending. Besides that, all very good. And I think we'll move on to the end of this video where I encompass all of the stuff I took a look at. This haul of all of these Thomas & Friends goodies has not cost me a lot of money, and that's something I definitely like. So let's take a look at all of the things together, and we'll round out the video. And here's everything we took a look at in today's video. I am very impressed that we went from home media to take along, take and play, even took a look at some ERTL, Trackmaster, and of course my bread and butter Thomas Wooden Railway. Now the trick for me after this video ends is to try to fit all of this into my display shelves so I can show it off and be proud of all of these cool Thomas & Friends toys that I've found over the last couple of months. Speaking of which, I have been very lucky to hunt all of this stuff down. Every time I go to a flea market or maybe a thrift store or antique shop, I try to look for some Thomas & Friends merchandise, and a lot of the time I don't find anything, but when I do, as with all of this stuff, I am very excited, and it is a great experience. Of course, I like buying stuff online, but there's nothing like the thrill of trying to find it at brick-and-mortar locations. And of course, eBay and Amazon, sometimes they have high shipping fees or prices are inflated. However, in person, you can often talk with the seller, build a relationship, and get a great deal on all of these items. So with all that said, make sure to comment on this video if you liked it, if you have any questions or suggestions. Like and subscribe to my channel, and stay tuned for more Thomas & Friends flea market finds videos in the future. I promise you, there'll be more installments in the coming months. I'm Wooden Railway Edward. Thank you for watching the video, and I will see you in the next one. Have a great day.